Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Mark D'Ambrosi, and we're going to be talking about his family from San Valentino, Torio. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Bob, for having me. I appreciate it. Hope you're well.
So when did you get the bug to start researching the family?
Well, the bug came for me probably in the mid 70s. I didn't give much credence to Roots when it came out, but it definitely was there as far as the interest. My family has always been one where it's been larger than life, like a lot of Italian American families. But for me, my grandmother's youngest sister, my grandmother died when I was 5, but her youngest sister lived until I was in my early 30s. She would always be talking about family. So my grandmother's family was the most prevalent one, and she actually sat me right down. I have it somewhere in my notes, written on the back of an envelope. The names of her mom's siblings and her mom and her grandparents. And when I actually did the research about 10 years later or so, I actually found all those people, which was amazing that she actually had it all right. Um, but then it just got started. I just continued to dig more. I got into my wife's family, which was German and Irish, but that's kind of another totally other area. But the Italian side, my grandfather's side, the San Valentino Torio family, we always knew where the town was, but my surname, when my father was born, the midwife added an O to my last name, and I've actually changed it because it doesn't have an O in Italy, and we actually legally changed it, which was really, I was real proud to do that. But around 1997, we started writing letters. That's when I wrote the first letter to San Valentino and looking for family. And a cousin wrote back, and he connected me. Well, he had connected with one of his cousin's spouses who worked at the town hall in the Casa Comunale, and he made the connection and connected our families. And so in 2009, I got an email connection through Facebook with one of the cousins that I had been connected to, the families. I've been writing letters back and forth for Christmas from 97 until then. And then finally went to Italy for the first time and met my father's family. Wonderful, amazing people, and became an Italian citizen in 2018 through that line. And my research kind of started the website. The idea for this website started from there, because, like a lot of Italian American families, getting back to Italy, when you're in one town, you find that the names all circulate. You get to know the names of the families in that town. And as I started to research different family lines, I started to pull in other families into my line. And I just thought, this might be a really easy way to go back as early as I can. I mean, the civil records go back to 1809, which I'm grateful for that town. It does have that. But to be able to pull and start to document all the families and create just a town-wide family tree, which has been really, really helpful, because I could start to see. I mean, like, every family is game. Every family is an option. There's no exclusionary, exclusionary criteria, because everybody can be included. And so, it could be a little bit of a, bright, shiny object adventure, because you're capturing everyone. So I've got kind of a method to my madness, and I've connected with people. I've got family still currently in San Valentino, and they've put me in touch with people through through the Facebook page. I've met with the mayor and told the mayor about my project and meet with him. We're going to be going in June for a wedding, and I'm going to try and meet up with him, or at least connect with him, to let him know kind of where we are with the project and continue to build. There's a lot of people from the town. The woman, ironically, the woman across the street from me, her grandfather is from the same town. Which,
Wow.
and there's a guy at my church who who he said he goes. I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "You'll never. The town is so small, you'll never know." I said, "Tell me what it is," and he said, "San Valentino, Torio." And he ended up being a fourth cousin, which is even
Wow.
more amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a very small town, but it has, probably like many, large expansion, large outreach into the greater worldwide population. So I think it's a good endeavor to do to help other people from this town research their family and grow.
So what? How close are the relatives from there? First cousins, second cousins?
In San Valentino, they are second cousin, once removed, second cousin twice removed. Amazingly, though, it's the removed gets people up, kind of throws people off. But um, physically looking at them, I could see my family
Yeah.
resemblance. It's really kind of scary. You don't think second cousins would look like family, but there is one cousin that is only a few years older than me, and he really reminds me so much of my dad's younger brother that passed in 2016, and it's amazing. I mean, I know that there's other families that have come into each of our lines to get us to where we are today, but there is definitely a resemblance, and um, there's a nickname, there's a family nickname, which I found out, my family is always trying to tell me stories about the name, nicknames and our family nickname. And so when I was doing research, it was an 1811 or 1812 death record. It actually listed the nickname, which I was,
Really? Wow. Yeah.
I paused when I looked at it because I knew the story, and I couldn't believe what I was reading because I know that this guy would be related to me, and he was. He was like an uncle. It was like I don't know, 3 or 4 times great uncle, but he is definitely in my line. So the story that my cousins in Italy have told me about our nickname is true as far as the what it is, and that it's common and it is in use still. And the cousins that are there, when we call each other that, it's not just kind of a game. It's really, there's a passion around that name, and you know um, it's kind of cool to have that. And it was unknown. It's unknown to my family in America. There are more. There are more people with that nickname in America than there are in Italy, because there are more people that immigrated from my family to America, compared to the ones that remained. There's only one brother that stayed, and that's pretty much everyone that's in this town
Mhm.
that's related to me. All the other ones, or descendants of other ones, have come to America, but we had no idea of the nickname. But when you say the name there, everybody kind of smiles because they all know what it means, and they all know that we're all blood.
Do you know the do you know the origin of the nickname? How far back it goes?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with PhilItaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Well, origin of the nickname. It's so my cousins say it's about 900 years. It could be about a millennia.
Wow.
Um, so supposedly, the nickname is Spiegata, and so what they've told me was Spiegata means when so the image they gave me is when you take an ear of corn, and it's all seed, obviously, and it doesn't rot, but it's like the corn it's dried, but you don't take it off the cob, and then the cob starts to sprout, like the seeds on the cob start to sprout. It's related to that. So there was there's an ancestor of mine who had some kind of plants, and they were all kind of bushy, or they weren't trimmed well. And so it's a reference to the messiness of the name. I don't know. So uh, but it has to do with that. And when I looked it up, kind of like translation, it talks about herringbone. but it's like it shows wheat, which is, but it wasn't wheat to begin with. But if you look at like a wheat kernel or the plant, it's kind of got that fringe, so it's
Hmm.
kind of like that kind of messiness. But but it has to do with agriculture and it has to do with plants, but it's somehow related. So, like I said, in this 1811 or 1812 death, it says alias or it says detto spiegata, which is like amazing to me that it would be over 200 years ago. It's actually written in Italian in this death act of Crescenzo, which is amazing to me. But it's about 900 is what they tell me, 900 years where the
Wow,
name came
that's
from.
something. So the family's been there for that long. Yeah. Wow. That's
Probably, yeah, and my belief is, and part of my belief in wanting to create the website is that um, because there are specific names. I haven't gotten back to maybe where some of the names may have come from or originated from, or if they've come from different areas. Um, that there's only so many people in this town that could actually be the beginning people. Exponentially, you have generation collapse where you just do not have enough people in just in one line or a couple of lines that makes sense. So um, so I really believe that some of anybody with my surname getting back to the early 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, eventually we all kind of like line up in, connect to a few people, a number of people with the same, roots. It's just, you get further out, it just becomes less apparent. Um, the woman, the name is common enough that in the church, when I did some research, the like secretary, um, I was with a cousin of mine, and the secretary's name was Grazia, and he said to me, "She's D'Ambrosi, but she's not related." So it's like, of course she's D'Ambrosi, and of course she's not related. But in my heart of hearts, I know that she's probably related at some point.
sure. Yeah.
But I'm sure that she is. But it's amazing when you see, and I've actually met other people and helped them to to kind of clarify some of their family and to bring some of their family forward. As a fifth cousin that I found through DNA, and we were able to amazingly find the record connection that connected her and I. And it's all because of these records. So it's like, it's not my direct line. So it's like, so when I could pull her in, but then there's all these other lines that her family's also come from San Valentino. So I'm like, why wouldn't I want to capture them? Because eventually they wrap around. Even the cousins that are there now, the women that they marry are from San Valentino, and their families are from San Valentino, and then they wrap around and they connect with other members of. It's like we may as well just make it one. It's just easier to capture everyone than to start to have multiple lines, because then eventually you start connecting those lines up and you're like, I've created a web. I've not
Yeah.
created
Yeah.
a family. I've created a web.
So so you mentioned that you did DNA. Were you, or did you ask, or did anybody in Italy do DNA? Because they don't typically do it, and I'm just curious. I was going to bring some
See,
tests when I went last year, and I didn't. I should have.
that's a good idea. I did. So I have one cousin that's done it here. He's from there, but he did it here, and he shows up that he's related, which is confirming. It wasn't like the DNA is kind of the ultimate decider. So
Mhm.
there is definitely, if there isn't a connection, then it can't be suspect. I mean, he's close enough that there should be, and there is. Um, Typically, there is not a lot of people that I know in my family that have done it. Um, I didn't think about this, but you've just kind of inspired me to think maybe I should get a few ancestry DNA tests, just because that's where the majority of my family have tested, at least the ones that are here in America that are Italian American. It would be helpful to see if I could find um, some other people, that would be willing. I mean, if I don't bring them, there's no way of them testing. So if I bring them, they might say, "Sure, I'll try it out." Um,
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I think too. Because I know there's very few. I mean, I have mine out there in a few places, and I get very few hits from. Europe in general, and hardly anything from Italy. But I think, to your point, it's the ultimate confirmation type of thing.
Yeah, and I understand the suspicion. I mean,
Hmm.
I know that. It's funny. I When I learned a little bit more of the history, it kind of confirmed some of the things that I was seeing, like the distrust in authority, the distrust somewhat in the church. Like the overall arching. Like we are the we speak the truth. And there's definitely some where it's kind of modified in this generation or the generations that it came to America. But I think even that there's definitely a grouping, a connection, where people just stuck to themselves. They just didn't want to air their dirty laundry outside of the family, and or talk about things outside of the family. I mean, that could be a lot of families, but I know in my family there was something more to it, and I can't say that I noticed anything different about it. It was kind of normal for me, but when I read some of the history as to why people felt that way, it was apparent to me that it was more than just just kind of what my family was. It was more common. I felt more of a kinship with other Italian Americans sharing that same story of reticence and hesitancy, and not like there's cousins. It's interesting. I had cousins on my grandmother's side who maintained a connection with for as long as my grandmother and her sisters were here in America, and I had been writing letters to that side too, sending Christmas cards, and this one cousin reached out to me, and this was about 10, 11 years ago. We were going to Italy, and I wanted to meet him. He reached out. I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity. Someone that's a little bit closer to my age, although he's a little bit younger, but close enough. And he was really hesitant. He was like, who are you? What do you like? Are you planning to stay with me? And like, so I had my cousin, my other cousin that is in Italy, who's on my grandfather's father's side, who I had a connection with. I said, please, can you please call him in Italian? Tell him I'm not looking for anything other than to meet you. And then, of course, when this guy and I met, we became like smitten cousins. We were just, I saw him in September when we were there the last time, and he actually met me. It was the last day. It was right before I was flying back home, and we had tried to connect the whole time. But he was so kind, and his family has been so kind. But there's always a arm's length, a little bit arm's length with that. Whereas my grandfather's father's family, it's like, nope, come on in, you're in, all the way in, as in as you could possibly be. And it's odd for me to be that in with people that I didn't grow up with. It's a nice feeling, but it's just very, you just, I'm like, I don't really know you guys. You're taking me into some of your inner sanctum things, like, a wedding that you're bringing me. Say, come on, we're going to go pay for the wedding. And I'm like, you want me to come with you? Really? I'm not going to say anything, but I'm like, okay, I guess if I'm going to go, I'm going to go with you. Whereas like, it just seems strange to me that it was that close, but we've been that close. That's the way that family, that group of people and I have been. So,
Yeah, but I think that they have a whole different mentality about it. I think, and that's what I noticed when I met, and I didn't even know they existed. My dad's first cousins, the women in their 90s, and I didn't know my grandmother was sending them money during the war. She was sending photographs they had my parents' wedding photo. So
yeah,
and so I didn't know them in a sense, but they knew me,
yeah,
because they knew my grandmother. They were my grandmother's nieces. So, um, yeah, they have a different kind of sense of family than I think we
yeah.
do. You
Yeah,
know?
I would agree with that. That's true for all of the cousins. They have a my grandmother. I didn't know. I was writing to this one cousin who was a generation older than me, and she wrote, and I had to check with my aunt. I said she said something about that my grandmother sent packages. It's like I'm like, am I reading that right? And my aunt said, yes, your grandmother used to send
Yeah.
packages to Italy, and and they stopped because they asked for my aunt's wedding dress, and my grandmother goes, I can't send you my aunt's wedding dress, because in Italy it would have been the thing, like, well, they probably figured you only going to wear this dress once. Why not let everybody else get a chance to wear it so it gets some use? Which I mean,
It makes
cognitively,
sense.
it makes sense to do that. But I think my grandmother's thinking, well, I've got other daughters and maybe granddaughters that might want, and if it goes to Italy, it'll never get back to America, because it will, it's not like, we live in town and it's just going to move back. It's a major thing. But I had to look. I'm like, packages? And she said, yeah, she used to always send packages, which was amazing to me. But they knew me, even the ones that in my grandfather's father's side. um he was similar. There were things that they knew. When I reached out, there was a story about my grandfather. um there was a story about him. There was a murder, and so what I found out that was they wanted to know. They were always told as children, these are the cousins that are more my age, but as children they were told about this great uncle. And when I came around, they were immediately sending me photographs to say, "Is this him? Is this him?" And I'm thinking, and I didn't know about the story, and I kept saying to my wife, "What's the interest in my grandfather? I have no idea what the interest is. Why?" And so then when I started to get to know them, my grandfather was the youngest of nine, and he was 25 years younger than his oldest brother. Actually, his oldest brother and his wife had already had a child, and then they were pregnant with their second child, which was a boy. And my great grandmother was pregnant at the same time, and she was like in her late 40s. And so the nephew and the uncle were the same age.
Hmm.
And so I think because my great grandparents were so old as my grandfather was growing up, that his older brother kind of stepped in as a surrogate dad, because he had a boy that was his own brother's age. So the two boys would pal around and do things together. And there was a connection between the oldest brother and the youngest brother, that didn't exist with any of the other siblings. It was my grandfather was kind of like, I'm responsible for this kid, and helping him to raise him. So it's just kind of a sweetness, like to be able to know that those cousins are, even though there's a distance, they're actually closer emotionally to me because of that connection with my grandfather. Which is also, it's my name, it's my surname, but it's like I mean, I've done a lot of research on my grandmother's side, but there's my grandfather's side is just there's a passion around this connection with this town. Whenever I go there, I feel at home. I feel like
Hmm.
this is like home again. Even though I've never, didn't grow up there. I didn't go there as a kid, but being there, I can navigate the town. I drive in the town. It's like home again. Um, so I have this affinity for this, and so it's kind of like a labor of love, because I love this town so much that,
Well,
and I
and that's what I kind of say to people. If they're going to Italy, I said, if you know where the family is from, you have to go, because it's a different experience than just going to Rome, or Florence, or a place like that, where it's
yeah.
it's a big city and you don't have a connection. But when you go back to those towns, you really feel a sense of home.
Yeah. Well, you almost like, if you don't know family, you almost like, I mean, I haven't had this sense, but I imagine there'd be like this longing to say, God, I wonder if there's anybody in my family from South. We're literally like on the street. We're like, you know, we're on the street. Is there anybody on the street that like knows my family? Am I recognized here? Am I known here? Of course, in my town, and this is probably true of a lot of towns too, but if I said the name, I mean, there's a bar with with my surname. If I went in there and I said, in Italian, if I said to them, I'm looking for my family, my name is your name, he would say, well, what's the nickname, or what, like, because because of the clans, there's so many different families that have different identifiers and monikers, that you have to be able to know that, because you're like saying, well, I don't know which D'Ambrosi family you come from, but having the name, if I had known it before, but having the name, if I said this is the name, they would immediately know which people I should be
Hmm.
connecting to, because they would like could literally almost walk me to their door to say this is your where your family lives.
And,
Um,
and I've heard story. I mean, that I've interviewed people, and that's the story I got. They were walking down the street, and somebody says, "Who are you?" And they give the name, and they all of a sudden people are coming out of the down the road. This is your family,
yeah,
and this is your
this
family.
is your family. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, very
yeah.
much so. Yeah, yeah. We did that for my grandmother's. My grandmother's town. We were at the feast of Santa Filomena, and we went for the feast. I wanted to go. I wanted to go in really in honor of my grandmother, and in memory of her, because it was like in my great aunts, because that was the two really that I remember. But to think, like, to close my eyes and think that they were girls and this feast was going on, and I'm
Hmm.
sure this was a big, big, big deal to them, to have like all of their cousins and have everybody like this, there everybody that was there. It was just, middle of summer. It was probably a wonderful time to see everybody. And when we were there, it was just like that. It was like seeing cousins, and I had already had connections. So it's like just seeing them and like meeting one cousin in the pastry shop, and then walking to the main street and seeing other cousins. And that's true of even in San Valentino. It's the same way, where they're around. You just, and I say to my wife, I can't get mad at people in this town. And she says, why is that? I said, because honey, they could be family. I don't want to be, I have no reason to be mad at my family. They all could be relatives of mine. So I really want to be mindful of that. So, yeah, yeah. So it's been a fun time to like
Now, have
dig into that.
were you able to find any homes where they lived and go
Well,
inside, or at least
yeah, well, I haven't. I know that the family in San Valentino knows where my grandfather was born. Um, so I know that, and but I haven't been like I really would like someone to say, just walk me by it. I'd like to take. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like I know the town, but I don't know that specifically, and I have always been when I know kind of where it is. I kind of look down the street, but I don't know exactly. If I know where it was, I would probably venture on my own to have my own moment with
Mhm.
that space. Um, that might be something that I do this time, just to say, show me exactly where it was. Where did these people live? Where in town were they? And it's not far from the church. It's within walking distance of the church. Um, so it would be interesting to see. I mean, I don't know in Italian records if there's anything with land records to be able to figure out where in town people lived or where families lived. There probably is, but I haven't really seen it. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
well, sometimes
it's identified.
the records have the address. I know with some of my
They
grandparents, they had
do.
the
Yeah,
address where they were born
yeah,
or
they do.
died.
They do have that. I mean, I don't know that they have it on my grandfather's. I've never actually seen my grandfather's birth act. That town after 1865. A lot of those immigration years that coming to America, that generation of people, those records aren't available online. I know they exist, but I'd have to go and see that. So some of the older records they do, but the names have all changed. So when I mention the names
Yeah,
of
the streets are
streets, they're
different.
they're like people are like, I don't have an idea where that is in town. But there's enough there that um, to spend time to linger uh, in this area is just really it's close enough to Naples. We're almost in Naples. We're just it's over the border in Salerno. Um, so I'm like, do I feel do I feel like my family is really from the Salerno area? It's kind of hard. Even all of my family except for my mom's side, my dad's parents, they're on the fringe. One's in Avellino, but just over the border or over the province line. Same
Mhm.
with my grandfather, just over the line. So I actually feel more Neapolitan when it comes to actually being from the province of Naples. It's like a stone's throw away from the provincial line. Um,
Yeah, well, that's my dad's family's from Naples, and and I didn't, I always they said Naples, so I was associated with inside the city, and some of them were there, but I didn't realize that my paternal grandmother, that she was now it's Chircala, but back then it was Massa di Soma. But I didn't know, exactly where she was from until we just went there and I met my cousin and he explained everything.
Mm.
But we were lucky enough to go because of my grandmother's family and who they were. Some of the homes, going back, 300 years, and one place in particular in Calabria, they uh, was the place where they went during the summer, I guess, to go collect the rent or whatever. But he was the owner was nice enough to let me go in, and you know
Oh wow,
is
that's
right in the
cool.
square, and go upstairs and wave from the balcony with my cousin and all of that stuff. So
Mm.
that was like, uh, and you it's a whole different feeling, you're standing on the balcony where your third great grandfather stood.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
surreal,
It's
when
yeah, it's one thing to
you-
walk the streets, but it's one thing to be in the home where they would have done everything, just had
yeah,
their mundane life. They would have stood at a stove or at a fire to cook a meal, or to, a bedroom where their children would be sleeping, or anything like that would be. It's a very different
yeah,
experience. That's one
yeah.
thing I would like to experience, that
And,
piece.
and that was in Montebello, and then not far away in Fasado, they had another big place. I mean, it is, I don't know how many, couple of thousand, 3,000 square foot, whatever it was, 2-story, big, stone place. And it's not owned by the family anymore, of course, but they had this big picnic for us, and we're standing out there, and we're there for hours and hours and hours. And finally, I said to somebody, I said, doesn't the owner care that we're here? And they were like, no, doesn't matter. and, and and they said he might come out. He might come by. We'll see. So eventually, towards the end of the day, he did come by and he was asking what was going on, and they explained it. So then he asked if we wanted to go in. He doesn't live there,
Oh,
uh, and it was um, you know good and sad at the same time, because it's in such disrepair inside, but you could still
yeah,
see the vestiges of what it looked like,
yeah.
in 1850 or whenever it was. The ceilings, you could still see what was left of the ceilings, and the hallways, and things like that. And the town wanted to buy it from him a couple of years ago, I guess, and maybe make it a tourist place or whatever they were going to do with it. And he won't sell it, so it's
Mhm,
just kind of sitting there, sad.
mm.
Um, so I have to ask you. So how did this whole project come together? Were you know, because I thought about doing it a couple of times in my maternal grandparents' hometown in Torito, Bari, and yeah, we're lucky because they have almost all the records filmed from 1809 all the way up to the 50s,
Mhm.
40s. And my uncle actually didn't live there until 1950. He didn't come over until 1950.
Mm.
So how did you gather all these records? And I guess more importantly, for anybody else who wants to do it, uh, how did you collate all of that into a website?
So, so what I started to do on my end was to start with. I started with the earliest years and just starting to extract them. I used a just used Microsoft Excel just to gather information. So, um, I mean, I use a software. I mean, a genealogy program. I think at the time it might have been Roots Magic, but I'm using Legacy Tree, and but what I did was I would pull them into Excel, so I would make sure I was capturing everything, and then I would create an entry into the genealogy software, and then it's a labor of love. So you're going, if you're doing birth, you're doing all the births, and you're going one by one by one by one, and then you could start to, like, you can start kind of anywhere, because if you start with babies, especially early 1809 records, the parents don't exist anywhere. I mean,
Hmm.
they're like, they're not, there's no like history of them yet. So you can put them in, but then eventually, or you could start with marriages and then potentially capture their children as you go forward. So once you get going with that, um, you start to connect as you move forward in time. You start to connect other people together. You'll start to see, if it's a marriage, you might find marriages of siblings, and so now you've got a small family with the parents and two or three of their children and who they married and when they married, and so with the website. One of your previous guests is a good friend of mine, Eric Becerra. I had chatted with him because he talked about this for him, in kind of a concept conversation. And he recommended and I'm going to not say the name right. I have to think about what it is. It's TNG. The next. Um, I can't think of it. I can get it to you, but there's a website that you can go to, and they help you on hosting. You buy like a one-time purchase, and then there's a template that you can choose depending on how you want to display the information. Um, and then you get to pick whatever pictures and kind of the layout. And then basically it's as simple as you create your tree in the genealogy program, you create a GEDCOM file, which is a genealogy program, a file created with one of these, and then you just upload it. And the system is smart enough, and it puts everyone where they belong. Whatever source citations you use in your program, it will send those over as well. You can upload, if you have digital images of people, you can upload those to the website as well, and they're connected to the person. Um, and then as you just do more research, you can then just upload. You just create a new GEDCOM file, and you just kind of do an overwrite, and it adds all the new people that you
Yeah.
add in. And so that was a big concern when I initially started. I'm like, how am I gonna? This is not like done. I'm gonna continue to do research. I'm like, how do I not screw this up? And it's really simple to do. And as I add people, and as you can see, one of the things that I sent was an image of the different surnames, and there's all different templates, so you can have things displayed in different ways, but it gives you like the top 50 surnames, and it tells you how many people in the tree have that surname. So you can, you start to see and recognize this is from this town. As you do the research, there's no holds bar in who you research. um, Obviously the research gets complicated. I have one. Um, this guy is married into my family, but his father was married 4 times and had children with each wife. And it was to like tease him out, and to like it's like you have one guy who is the father of someone who's married into your family, but it's like to be able to pull his whole family. And as you do research, you're like, I have this person in my database. Sure enough, I did. And you'd loop them around, and so it would fill it in. So it really is kind of fun to do that, because then you upload it, and everything, as long as it's straight in your genealogy program, it'll be straight on the website. And so, if people are looking to do research, because they can search the website, even though they don't have to be. I mean, if they wanted to be contributors, they could reach out to me. They would reach out to me, and they would say, "Look, this is my family town as well, and I would really like to contribute to adding to the website." They could do that as well. And but then then there's like, people can just start to take ownership and contribute to building it, because this is the project, but this isn't like, it's not doesn't belong to me. I'm just kind of the steward uh, to make this happen. So my goal is to get other people involved, people even in Italy. I think they're fascinated with our connection with them. I think
Mhm.
they're just there. They don't, like when I tell them that I go to Italy and I go to cemeteries, they look at me like I've got 8,000 heads. They're like, "What did you do? You went to a cemetery? Like, you're not even from here. You went to an Italian cemetery?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did. That's kind of what I do." But but I'm not. It's not unusual for genealogists to do that. Um, but they're just fascinated with how much information I know, and like just the breadth and depth of the knowledge of our family and of the town. There was a gentleman whose cousin was having a baby. He's from this town. He and I connected in another realm. And he says, when I went in September, goes, "Hey, since you're going, can you do me a favor? If I send you these baby gifts, will you bring them to her?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna be there. Sure, send me the gifts." And so, of course, I had to put out an APB with my family to say, "Do you know this family?" And oh my God, it was like everybody's like, "Who is this? What?" And finally, we found somebody who knew where they were, and I found them. And so she asked me more about my family, and I told her my surname, and she mentioned this one cousin, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's my cousin." Goes, "Well, he and I went to school together."
Mm,
So it's like it's how many degrees of separation. It was like it's kind of funny. There are virtually one or two. It's not
yeah,
very many
yeah,
degrees, and this person is a stranger to me, but her family can easily be represented in this. And so you set up so for the website you can set up parameters, so you can have anybody that's living just marked as living, so you can protect the privacy of any living member of the town, whether they're descendants in America or anywhere in the world. Um, and then it just gives information about, it just starts to show the the network of the family, and then where they all can go, because they all go everywhere. It's like it's amazing. 8 children that could be married into 8 different families, or some brothers could be married to some sisters in other families, and then you group them together. But that way you don't have to say, well, I don't want to include that one. You include everybody, and it's a lot easier to do
yeah.
the research. You just have to be diligent about working at it, and just it's like sometimes you just sit and you just get to a point like, I can't look at them anymore. I can't look at any
I
other
know.
record. My
You
eyes
have
are
to walk
crossed.
away.
I have to stop. So, but yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
how you.
I'd like to. I've thought about it. I like to do that for my Puglia ancestors because I have so many records and I have so many of the names and things like that. But it is it's addicting. But I tell people the same thing. I said sometimes you just have to walk away if you're stumped. I said you'll come back in a month and all of a sudden that thing that you were looking for will miraculously show up, or make the connection. My strangest one was my cousin Linda, who's like a fourth cousin here,
Mm,
and she contacted me many years ago and said, "I think we're researching the same person, Maria Piomalo." And I said, "Yeah, we are." I said, "It's my great grandfather's sister. It was her great great grandmother, I believe."
mm,
And um, you know, we were going back and forth, and she says, "I don't. You sure?" And I said, "Yeah, I know. I'm sure." I said, I had never knew that my grandmother had any family here, up up until many years, and so I said, "Well, do an ancestry test. That'll tell us." And she did the test, and she came back, and it said ancestry says we're not related. And I said, "That's impossible. It can't be. Let me look at mine." And they showed me on my side as being her relative, but not, she wasn't
uh,
showing on her side.
uh,
So I said, "Well, I don't understand." I said, "But I know we're connected." I said, "There's no question about it." And she contacted them and they looked at something and they said, "Yeah, we made a mistake. I don't know what happened." But what came to pass, which was really crazy about it, she, uh, her family and my family in America, in Queens, right? They were connected from the 1920s through the 1960s, 70s, right? And we never, far as we know, she's a little bit younger than me, but as far as we know, we've never met. Maybe we met when we were little kids or something like that.
mm, mm,
Um, but once we started putting things together, um, I remember my father saying her grandmother was Beatrice, and I remember my father saying they were going over to Aunt Beatrice's house and all of this. And when I married my first wife, I lived 5 blocks away from her grandmother, and she says, "Well,
mm.
we were in Flushing all the time." I said, "We probably passed each other on the street and never knew it." And some 40 years later, through the internet and
Yeah,
ancestry,
You go
we found each other.
around the world to find the connection that was right next door. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's so
And
very true.
she came over with her cousin, and I had my cousin Paul come over, who was, you know, his mother was very close with them. And, they came over and it was like we knew each other forever. I mean, there was just that, you know, some weird family connection there and, you know, this incredible bonding thing.
Yeah, and then once what I find is once you connect, you can't disconnect. It's
No,
like
no, it's
it's not even
impossible.
a like it's not even possible. I can't like you don't want to
No,
disconnect.
no.
There's something more to it than that. I can't really describe it. It doesn't make sense logically, but because I've had it happen and I don't know like what to make of it, but it's just the most amazing experience because logically you think, well, I met you once and or I met you and we have a connection and then it kind of goes, but there is something, especially if they're here, there's something about the connection that goes so much deeper that it changes. Like, so this guy that is at my church, when and I had chatted with him and we found out, like when we found out and I said, what was your, like, who are these people? Cause I literally found it like on like a passenger list and like he did that they did come and there's all this connection. So when I said, well, what is your grandfather's name? And he told me, and I'm like, oh my God, they were going to see your grandfather. I said, we're connected, we're related. So recently in church, I saw him and it's like, and I've seen this guy forever. Like that, it's like, I've seen him forever.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw him this time, I mean, both of us, it was like, I went over and I hugged him. I'm like, oh my God, I've been wanting to see you. It's just weird because it's like I've known him as just somebody at church, but now that he's like related to me,
Hmm.
it's so different, such a different feeling. It's like so now I can never be unrelated. Whenever we see each other, it'll be that same way when you see these cousins that were like 5 blocks away. You'll be like, I can never unsee you the same way that I can't unknow you anymore because now I know you in a way that is so much more deep that it transcends words.
And it's even more profound when you find somebody in Italy.
Oh
Like
yeah,
when I got contacted by my cousin Nicola, who is um, he's a half first cousin of my dad because my great grandfather had two families like 30 years apart. But um, it's crazy because here's my father's first cousin that I never knew existed, and like you said, you could never uncousin him anymore.
yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's like it don't it's not life removing, it's life giving. It's like you just my life is more rich because of the
Yeah,
connection.
yeah.
And
And
it's
we
like I
had
don't
we
want to get that rid of that.
we had a funny story because in Naples, and we always called my father's cousins here aunt and uncle because that's what we were taught, right? And he explained to me. He said, "Well, he says not necessarily an Italy thing, but certainly in Naples it is. And if you haven't, a first cousin, or if your first cousin once removed, you refer to your parents' first cousin as aunt or uncle." So we were leaving the apartment and saying goodbye, and I said, "Well, I don't feel like we're cousins. I feel like we're brothers now." And he said, "No, no." He says, "I'm your uncle."
Yeah.
And even though he's like 10 years younger than me or something like that, and he said, "We're in Naples. I'm your uncle in Naples."
Yeah, that happened. It's funny you say that because the cousins in Italy, my dad's side, um, I never thought of this. I mean, I never thought of this, but there's a small subset. They're younger than me, and uh, I didn't realize they were talking to someone, referring to me, and I was there, and they kept saying "CEO,"
Hmm.
and I looked and I kind of like I understood what they were saying, and I just remember what it was like. I I just remember smiling, thinking, this is such an honor to be referred to, even though they're my cousins. I mean,
Hmm.
everybody is cousins. There aren't, at this age of in my life, there are no uncles that
Right.
would be
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Italy. Um, but to be referred to as uncle, there to someone that was a younger generation, because basically their dad and I were the same age, or virtually the same age, that they just referred to me as uncle. And even in Italy, they do all the time. I mean, all of, like, so the cousins that I know, all of their parents, first cousins are aunts and uncle. They don't even,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a way. And we didn't do that as much with my dad's cousins here. Um, my grandmother did. It was when my aunt was talking about one of her mom's cousins. She kept talking about this one aunt, and she in Neapolitan. She said "Si Dunat," and her husband was "Si Carmenil," and I'm like, so when I really kind of understood like what she was referring to, I'm like, how are they your aunt and uncle? And he goes, "Oh no, they're not my they're not my aunt and uncle. They're my mother's cousin." I'm like, "Oh, you call them?" It's like I'm like, "Oh," because we didn't do that. But of course, now I that was the first kind of like brought into my awareness. But then in Italy, everybody does it. It's just the way
It's
it
just the way it
is.
is. Yeah.
And so
It's
when it happened to me, I'm like, okay, that makes me feel good. So there's one of my second cousins, my last second cousin in Italy died last year, and he was like 88. Um, but he's like my uncle. So I would just call him as Zio Attilio. I never referred to him as cousin, even though I could, bring out my chart and show you that he truly is my second cousin. You know, it's uncle, and it's just kind of like that. It's almost like so much sweeter. I don't
well,
know. There's just
we would do that online because my fourth cousin Cinzia was saying that Nicola was my Zio, and I'm saying no, I'm pulling out the chart, right?
yeah.
And I'm
Go
saying,
away, you
no, no, and
American.
she's
That's not
insisting,
right.
no, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. He's your uncle.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
finally, he explained it all to me, and I said, oh, okay, because I thought growing up when we referred to um, my dad's cousin as aunts and uncles, I just thought I didn't know. I thought it was my parents. It was just we were supposed to respect them in that way, and that was
Correct.
it. And
Correct. It
we
was
just
just the thing you
went
just did,
along with
right?
it.
Got it. Yeah,
Um,
understood.
so listen, this has been a lot of fun, certainly, Mark. Before we go, could you tell people the name of the website if anybody wants to find their
Sure.
family?
Yeah. So my website is San Valentino Torio Families. That's all one word, .com. And you got to put Torio in because some people will forget and put San Valentino and it doesn't pull it up. But San Valentino Torio Families.com. There are pictures, 3 pictures. The coat of arms is in the middle, and then there's a picture of each of the churches. The church on the left, I think, is San Giacomo Apostolo Maggiore, and the church on the right is Santa Maria della Consolazione. And those are the 2 main churches in the town. And then there's a whole, there's a whole backside you can, to go in and change things around. But, it's in there. People want to do some research. They want to look for family. Obviously, this is a work in progress, so not everybody's there. It's about a 10,000 population currently, so it's not a small town. But if you are from there, please, there's a link for an email. You can reach out to me. I would love to hear from people that are from there. I mean, I'm whenever I do, it's like immediately we become friends because
Hmm.
we have this connection. I'm sure you probably know this because people reach out to you and you're like,
Yeah.
oh yes, we're related, we're connected. Even if we're not blood, we're connected. Um, but it becomes this passion place. People that are wanting to know more, even if they just are just finding out, they start to see familiar names. They start to realize that, oh, that aunt and uncle, they're in that same family, that same surname group. I wonder if they're from there. And then lo and behold, they are. So anybody from there, please reach out because it would be fun to connect and to continue this project going forward. I mean, like I said, it's a labor of love, but I love this place.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Well, listen, thanks again. Have a great day, and
Thanks.
we'll talk again.
Alrighty. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino, just letting you know that my new book, Farmers and Nobles, is now available for sale on www.italiangenealogy.blog/Farmers and Nobles, or you can find the link in the podcast notes. Thanks for listening.